question I'd have for you as a Christian leader is, what is the evidence that God's mighty hand is on your life, on your leadership?
This podcast is brought to you by Blackaby Ministries International. To find out more, visit blackaby.org.
Well, welcome to the Richard Blackaby Leadership Podcast. My name is Sam Camp, and I'm your host. And joining me at the table, as always, is Dr. Richard Blackaby.
Always a delight, Sam.
Pleasure's all mine, Richard. We have been plowing our way through Nehemiah.
Plowing sounds a little tedious there, Sam.
Well, and it also maybe gives the impression that we've been making a lot of headway, verse-wise. But if you've been with us through the first four parts of our study of Nehemiah and his leadership, then you will know that we are really just easing into chapter 2.
Yeah,
not very far along. We've seen already some great insights into Nehemiah, and it's only been four parts, and who knows how many parts.
Oh, I know. Only the Lord knows.
Yeah, only time will tell. But before we get into that, a couple of housekeeping things I wanted to mention at the top. One, as always, we are coming up on the coaching workshop. It's going to be happening in October.
Yeah.
There is still space to sign up for that, but we're getting a lot of folks signed up, so we may, sign up sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Would be my encouragement.
Yeah, but it's been very strong.
Yeah, we've had a lot of folks sign up. That'll be happening in Jonesboro, Georgia. That's just south of Atlanta, pretty close to the airport. So if you're traveling in, it's pretty straightforward to get to. And then with that, the intro to online coaching, which is really just a way to explore what coaching is, sort of a brief overview of coaching, and if you think it would be something of value for what you do, and you can use code podcast at blackabyinstitute.com to sign up for that for free. Mm-hmm. And that's just got some teaching videos. And then finally, we are going to take a little break in August. So this comes out the last Tuesday in July, and we're going to take some time off. So you won't really be hearing Richard and myself, but we have something even, dare I say, better than Richard.
Yeah, you can dare to say that.
But, well, just different. I wouldn't say better. I'd say different. But we're going to dig into the archives of Blackaby Ministries. One, because if you have archives, what's the point if you don't dig into them? Yeah. And two, Blackaby Ministries is celebrating 20 years of existence as an organization this year. Mm-hmm. And as part of that, we wanted to celebrate some of our heritage and our founder, your father, Henry. And so I found a few sermons of his that we are going to highlight over the course of the month of August. Yeah. And so that is going to be what you'll be hearing if you've subscribed to this podcast. And we'll be back with our regularly scheduled programming in September. But it just gives us a chance to catch our breath as well. And we thought it's such a great opportunity to go back. And I've enjoyed just, going through and listening to some of these sermons,
powerful.
From your dad. And I think it's a real treat for our listeners to be able to listen.
Yeah. And Sam, I've tried several years ago. I started to just try to take August, not off. August isn't necessarily all just a vacation for me, but but the fall is always very busy, and I'm doing a lot of speaking and travel, and so I like to be able to have a month where I'm a little bit more off the road and time just to read and study, and I usually try to dig into some not new passages of the Bible, but some passages I haven't dug into for a while or ever, so that in the fall when I get back, I've got a bunch of fresh new stuff to share. So I've tried to always do that and just kind of, shift a little bit in August and do some new study, read some books that I've been behind in reading, so that my cup's full. So that's part of it as well.
Yeah, and I think it's a good practice if you can do it, to just take some time off, not off, but to shift your normal activity in such a way that you would hopefully get new insights.
Because you can't give what you don't have.
Yeah.
So you always want to have
I can't
more.
wait to see what you're going to get in August to give to all of us in September. So I
might just mention that finally, we are somewhere, next May 18 to 20, I'll be back at the Cove.
Yeah.
And it looks like I'll be teaching the brand new sequel to Experiencing God. And so just to alert you that sometime usually in September, the Cove will open up registration.
Yeah.
And really the last number of times, all of the housing on-site accommodations in the Cove have been booked full. And so for those who really want to be able to stay on-site, you want to go ahead and book that earlier than later. And so sometime in September, we'll put that out on social media in various places or in the show notes, even for my dad and his sermons, if you just kind of keep an eye on that as soon as it comes open. But it's usually sometime in September. So
yeah, well, good. And we'll, as always, put links to that in the show notes when it becomes available. We don't want you to miss out on that opportunity. But with that out of the way, Richard, let's dive back into Nehemiah.
Yeah, and we've had some great comments from folks who've just really enjoyed this. And I do think that of all the books in the Bible, this is one of the stronger ones when it comes to leadership. Just so many classic examples. And of course, Nehemiah is someone who, there's a problem. The people of God have been beaten down. They're not what they ought to be. There's ruins, there's baggage, there's division, there's discouragement. And that's in every age. There have been moments like that. But what's interesting is over the years, when you stop and think about it, in the Bible, God's people always are finding themselves in a mess, in a difficult place. And God's answer always is to raise up a leader. Sometimes it could be a woman like Deborah, a judge. It could be Samuel. It could be Gideon. In this case, it's Nehemiah. And there's Moses, there's Joshua. There's so many people throughout history that God has used. And, part of what's interesting about that is all those people are very different. He doesn't have a prototype every time. Okay, let's get the same kind of leader that we've always used in the past.
It's not just a bunch of Davids.
Yeah, they're always different, and they all have their flaws, they have their strengths, they have their struggles, but God uses them to get the job done. And so Nehemiah is unique, really. You don't find another person quite like Nehemiah that God uses again. And I like that, because that means you don't have to measure yourself up necessarily to Nehemiah or anyone else and say, I guess God can't use me. I'm not a Nehemiah. Well, yeah, this is the first time God ever used a Nehemiah, and in some ways maybe the last, just like him. But so we've seen God puts it on Nehemiah's heart, and he's in this very good job. And he walks away from it. He doesn't quit his job, but he certainly puts it in danger, because he's going to leave and be gone for several years. And of course, there's all kinds of court intrigues. There's people who would love to have his job, so it's quite a sacrifice for him. He's putting a very lucrative career in jeopardy because God put something on his heart, and he just knows he needs to do it. So he has, we saw last time, he presents that to the emperor and the king, and he's given permission to go. And so he makes his way to Jerusalem. So I want to pick up in verse 11 of chapter 2 today. So we are getting near the end of chapter 2, Sam. So
that's something.
Make a note of that. And so verse 11, it says, "After I arrived in Jerusalem and had been there 3 days." And so now, I don't think most of us can appreciate, even if you're in a royal caravan, if you're going in government accommodations and transportation, it's still a long journey. And it's by camel or horse, or more likely how he's getting there. And so when he does arrive, he takes 3 days, presumably, to rest, to get himself together. And for some of us, it's good for us to see that, because for some of us, as soon as we hit the ground, we're running. We walk into the building. We've just gotten our new job. I think a lot of our listeners can remember a time where you began a new position and you walked into the office the first day. I have vivid memories of on a couple of occasions walking into a building that I'm now the boss of. I'm the leader here. And you're looking around, and everywhere you look, you see things that need to be fixed and updated and addressed. And everybody has their ideas that they hope that they can share with you about what they think you need to do in your new role. And Nehemiah takes 3 days. Presumably, I'd like to know kind of what he did, but I have a feeling he just got the road weariness off. He gets himself fresh. He might be reading reports or talking to key people, but for the most part, he's just getting himself ready. And I've shared before, but I think one of the mistakes I've made as a leader has been that I didn't have enough margin between one job and another. I've been kind of bad about that. And so I remember leaving my church and becoming a seminary president. And basically, I had a Sunday that was my last Sunday as a pastor. Preached my last sermon on Sunday morning. We baptized a bunch of people who all wanted to be baptized by me before I wasn't the pastor anymore. Sunday night, we had a farewell party at the church that was a lot of fun, but also very bittersweet. It's the last time I'd see many of these people, perhaps ever. And then Monday morning, we're on the road, driving to our new city, about 14-hour drive away. We get there a day or two later. And the next morning, I'm in the office and I'm starting to work. And no 3-day period, nothing. Just arrived late one night. The next morning, I'm in the office going. And I don't recommend that. That's partly because I stayed as long as I possibly could in my last job to try to help the transition. But Nehemiah realizes when you're taking on a huge task, make sure that you're physically, emotionally, spiritually ready for it. Get yourself charged up. And so it's only 3 days, but and he would certainly physically have had some travel weariness and so on. But he takes 3 days. And then it says, verse 12, I got up at night and took a few men with me. I didn't tell anyone what my God had laid on my heart to do for Jerusalem. And a couple of things just about that. One is we're going to see here in a moment that he's going to be surveying the wall himself. His primary task is to get this wall built, to protect the city, make it safe so that it can actually grow and develop commerce and other things. And so he's going to, what we're going to find is he's going to do a night tour of the walls himself. And this, of course, is such a huge leadership lesson, especially when you're doing a turnaround, when you're coming into a place that has been broken, dysfunctional, divided, something that everybody has an opinion about. You really want to get firsthand information. And I've just found that to be true. Every job I've ever come to, I've typically has been a turnaround situation, and there were lots of people with opinions. And they all the opinions were different. You need to really build this up. You need to address that. You need to watch out for that person. You need to buy this. You need to reach out here. Everybody wants to bend the ear of the new boss and let them know what they think. And if you ask people, they all have their different perspective. And I've seen one of the biggest mistakes you can possibly make is to trust what people tell you when you don't know yet if those people are trustworthy. And so Nehemiah wants, there comes a point where you need to have some trusted people that can do some of your scouting for you and can gather information for you. But at this early stage, Nehemiah wants to eyeball this wall himself. He doesn't want to trust anyone else's opinion. And sometimes you can even have trustworthy lieutenants that they're not trying to deceive you, but they just don't see what you would see. And I found that as a leader, that's one of the ways you know you are a leader. A leader and someone else can come into a room, and a non-leader is distracted by the tinsel and the shiny stuff and things that don't necessarily matter as much. And a leader comes in and immediately begins to see the important stuff. What really you're going to have to. This is what really matters. This is what will determine what we do next. And so there are just moments where don't delegate. There's some things a leader can't delegate. And sometimes getting the ground, getting the baseline, here's what I'm facing. Because I've known people that came up with all kinds of plans about what to do, maybe when they came to their church or when they began to lead this ministry. And then down the road, they discovered they were basing it on faulty information. Some people had told, and of course, pastors, that's often happened, where the search committee just failed to let them know about some of the troubling issues going on in the church, and now they have to completely change their plans now that they finally have learned the truth. So he gets up and he also says, I didn't tell them at first what God had put on my heart. Now, when we've looked at this earlier part in the first chapter, where Nehemiah asks somewhat of an innocent question to a friend, a brother, about what's going on in Jerusalem, but when he hears it, he's overcome with emotion, and ultimately he realizes, I've got to do something about this. And now here he's saying, God put that on my heart. And we in an earlier podcast, we looked at, how do you know if this is God or not? I mean, if you just watch the news, you're going to learn about troubled, broken down places and people. That doesn't mean that they're all invitations from God. But Nehemiah, at this point, he's taken long enough. He's processed things for a while now, and he is convinced this is what God has for me to do. And I'll just tell you, especially if you're in a turnaround situation or you're trying to revitalize a church, you better know that this is God calling you to do this, or else don't bother. It'll eat you alive. Yeah. So at this point, it's clear Nehemiah knows that it's what God has done, but he doesn't. It says it doesn't tell people right away what God had put in his heart. And again, I think that's another very important leadership lesson. Don't show all your cards right away when you walk into the room. You don't know you don't know all these people. You don't know who your enemies are. You don't know. There may be someone, and I've just seen this happen before, where a new leader comes in and right away he just thinks, well, we just need to share all the information we can, full transparency and so on. And a lot of that could be helpful, but you don't know how that's going to be used yet. And you don't know who's maybe a fifth column that's going to hear what's on your heart and then immediately be working against you. And maybe they're not even enemies. Maybe they're friends, but you're not ready yet for people to move into action.
Well, and I would say too that, and I feel like this probably often happens in church work and church leadership, because you think, hey, we're all on the same team. We're all striving to the same goal, and who would want to impede that? Yeah. But shockingly, there are people in the church who have different ideas than perhaps the leader does. And so I think the other thing to keep in mind too is that the people you're leading don't know that they can trust you yet either. Right. And so it's not necessarily that they're against you, but it may be that they need to figure out if you're trustworthy. And so I think if you lay all your cards on the table right away, then, for some of them that may be sort of too much to take in, and they're not sure what to do with that information.
Yeah. And, I remember coming to a church where the founding pastor was very much focused on evangelism and basically growing the church, getting more people in. And then the second pastor had a lot of bent that way as well, but a lot of catastrophe struck the church at that time, and so they had suffered a lot of people leaving the church. And so And so there's, I remember when I got there, the big question, and the first pastor was a very larger than life, dominant, sort of dictatorial kind of leader. The second pastor was a much less, not nearly as strong of a leader. And so everybody wants to know. I'm the third guy, so it's like, where do I fit on the scale? Am I going to be the dictatorial, barking out orders, or am I going to be a very laid back, collegial, sort of, what do you all think we ought to do kind of leader? And so, but when I get there, I don't know yet what we're even going to be doing. So I want to be careful. I don't kind of play my cards and then right away people are all saying, "Oh, Richard's just going to be a real dictatorial guy like the last guy." Well, I don't know. I'll have to wait and see what God wants me to do. And so I don't need to get people all in the flap, especially if you're going to be introducing changes. Yeah, there's going to be people it's going to cost people. It's going to maybe require sacrifices. You don't want people all distraught about change before you know for sure you're going to make the change. So because people, there are always those who are going to panic. They're going to start hitting the alarm button. They're going to start warning people. Sure enough, look what they're going to do. If you end up going there, then you may have to deal with that. But just don't cause yourself more grief before you need to deal with it. And I've seen folks that they ended up creating a stir needlessly, and now their leadership's already been hijacked because they're fighting a battle for something that they're not even necessarily going to be doing. And you think, wow, that's a waste. And so Nehemiah just keeps his cards to his chest, and he's doing his own homework before he takes any action, before he makes any announcements. And, I found that, and I've shared it in the past, one of the things I did when I came particularly to the church that had been so troubled was I read through the church minutes. I did my homework, and I got a baseline. I got the facts. It's interesting how people who perhaps were at the church the whole time during that period, but they don't, it's just funny how our memories are. And our memories remember things being much bigger than they actually were, or much smaller than they actually were. And so I had people informing me of how it was. And, there were 450 people at this particular event. And when I read the minutes, I find out, well, no, there's really only about 200 on site. The other 250 were at 3 other mission churches. But the person telling me had kind of forgotten that part. The numbers all kind of got merged over time. So it was just helpful for me to know the facts and to do my homework. And so Nehemiah, first he gets rested up, gets prepared. Then he does his homework. Then he goes and eyeballs things himself, goes around at night. And you got to remember that Jerusalem is actually up on a bit of a hill. There are some hills around there. There's some valleys, and the walls had been all torn down. And so some of these stones are quite large. They've been knocked down into the valley. They've slid down perhaps the side of hills. And so you've got these massive, and they've been sitting there for over a century. And so you think about a bunch of big stones tossed down hillsides, and been accumulating garbage, and
would you even see the stones at that point?
Yeah, like dust has settled, dirt has drifted. It's become a bit of a junkyard, and so it's going to be a disaster what you're looking at. And so he goes at night, which is maybe not the best way to get a good lay of the land. But it does, everyone else is at home sleeping, and so you can do it much more discreetly. And I think a leadership lesson when you're new especially is do as much of your homework kind of out of sight as possible. Just, lay that groundwork before people get worrying about what you're looking at and so on. And so in the next several verses, it just says that he he goes through these various gates. There's a valley gate. There's a serpent's well. There's the dung gate. Some interesting kind of. I'm not sure I'd want to be using the dung gate, but yeah. And it is interesting if you've been to Jerusalem, and sometimes you'll think, okay, where are all these gates that Nehemiah was passing through? And you have to realize that over the years, over the centuries, there were several different walls that were built. And of course, in time, as Jerusalem would get bigger, they'd have to extend the wall out. And so various builders particularly extended the walls, and then the walls would be torn down and have to be rebuilt. And so some of the gates that are mentioned in the Bible don't exist anymore because they got torn down, and when they rebuilt the wall, they built it further out and didn't have a gate right there, and so on. So so Bible scholars at times try to guess some of these gates were reproduced if it was like a gate leading near to the temple or something, but other gates were not necessary when they stretched out the walls in a different way. But so he does all that, and then in verse 16 it says, the officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing, for I had not yet told the Jews, priests, nobles, officials, or the rest of those who would be doing the work. And it's interesting. Nehemiah lists these different people. He knows that there's different groups that I think again that's just another great leadership lesson. Rarely are you leading a homogeneous group of people that are all the same, view things the same way, struggle the same ways. And so he kind of mentions there's priests, there's nobles, there's officials, there's Jews. He's listing all, some of the categories, which I think, again, as a leader, you realize, okay, that I'm leading different kinds of people, which means I'm probably going to have to lead in different kinds of ways. I think I've shared before, but I remember early on as a seminary president, trying to get information out to everybody the best I could. It was really before a lot of the digital age had developed. So we'd put out memos, and we'd put out paper memos at that time, just kind of updates of information, what I was working on, what we're looking at. And I remember at times, for a lot of my cognitive-oriented people, they disliked the information. Hey, thanks, just keep us posted. Then I found one person sitting at their desk in tears over the same memo. So here's these people all thanking me for all the steady flow of information, and here's someone else all distraught about the information because it made them immediately worry about this and that and things I hadn't said. And I realized, okay, I've got feelers, I've got cognitive folks, and they're going to read the same information and take it entirely differently. Some are going to find the succinctness of it all. Great, you're not wasting my time. You're giving me the high points. Someone else is worried about all the stuff that wasn't said and the information that's not there. And same people, I've got to lead both of them, but they're different. And so Nehemiah just realizes, okay, I've got different segments of people, but they're leading all of them. And so he says, I hadn't told them at first what I was going to do, but he said, verse 17, so I said to them, you see the trouble we are in. And I like the fact he uses we. Nehemiah has just gotten there. So these people, some of them have lived their entire lives there. And Nehemiah has just arrived that week, but he's already identifying himself. Now, he's not trying to talk like he's one of them and that he's suffered like they have, but he is saying, basically, this is my problem now too. I'm identifying with you. Your problem has now become my problem. And so he says, you see the trouble we're in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned. And again, I think you have to just keep being reminded, the ruins have been sitting there for over a century. So these people are very familiar. But the problem sometimes is, and we've shared this before, but when you've grown up in ruins, you don't really see them as ruins anymore. You just see them as, that's life, that's my world. I live in a ghetto. I live in ruins, in a church that's broken down. And, I'm told years and years ago this was a thriving, strong church or a thriving, lucrative business, but now it's just basically in ruins. And And now we just kind of operate dysfunctionally, all kinds of internal warfare and arguments and divisions. That's just what I've always known. But you stop to see, no, this is actually ruins. This is dysfunction. This isn't healthy. Just because that's all you've ever known doesn't mean it's good. And so sometimes you need an outsider to just call a spade and say, hey, folks, I know that this is your backyard. This is where you live. But these are ruins. This isn't real life. This isn't normal. This isn't what you want to continue to exist in. It needs to be better. And so he points it out and points out what it is. The gate's been burned and so on. And then he says, come, let's rebuild Jerusalem's wall so that we no longer will be a disgrace. I told them how the gracious hand of my God had been on me and what the king had said to me. They said, let's start rebuilding. And their hands were strengthened to do this work. So, I love the fact that when Nehemiah's ready on his terms and his timing, he said, he declares what they're going to do. And he says, all right, let's get to work. And I would say as a leader, try as best you can to keep control of the timetable. If you're the leader, you don't let other people set the timetable for you. Okay, you need to do this. You need to do this first. You need to do that next. He does his homework, checks everything out, gets prepared, rested up, and then when he's ready, he reveals what they're going to do. And it's interesting. He does say something I think real important. He says, I told them how the gracious hand of my God had been on me. And I'll tell you that throughout the Bible, that typically is the greatest source of authority that a leader has. The fact that God's with them, that they have a track record of God blessing and God giving victory. Remember, God said to Joshua, everywhere you go, you'll have victory. And so when Joshua stood before you and said, okay, let's go attack this city, well, you realize that God had given him victory every city he'd ever attacked. And so okay, we can follow this guy because he has a track record of success. Moses, every time he met with God, his face glowed. And so you had a sense of, okay, and he had performed all kinds of plagues and had managed to get the Israelites out of Egypt. And so it was clear that God's hand was on him. Question I'd have for you as a Christian leader is, what is the evidence that God's mighty hand is on your life, on your leadership? When it's one thing, if you stand before your people and say, follow me because I'm your leader, because I'm the CEO, well, that's the lowest level of leadership. But if you could say, listen, everywhere I've ever led before, God has blessed. God has made everything I've ever led thrive. Everywhere I've ever led, God has given us victory. We've had problems, but we've solved all those problems. Well, that's a different kind of thing. And so Nehemiah is saying, God has given me favor with the emperor. God has given me favor in our travel. Everything that I've done up to this point to get here. Let me tell you how God has opened the doors and made provision and given me safety and given me wisdom, shown me favor with other people. And I'll tell you what, when I meet a leader that clearly has the favor of God upon them, I'm much more inclined to want to follow. And so it says that the people said, well, let's start rebuilding. And their hands were strengthened to do this work. And again, you don't want to minimize that because these people have been living among the ruins for over a century, and they've basically done very, very little to nothing to fix things. Now, they made some efforts under Ezra to rebuild the temple, but the walls are all still in ruins. The walls don't get rebuilt until Nehemiah arrives. And so, but what's stopping them? I mean, they've lived in ruins all that time. Like, why in over a century, why have these people not just put these stones back on top of each other and built some kind of semblance of a wall? But it took a leader to come and a leader to give them hope. It's not that they couldn't have done it before, but that's the role of a leader, is to mobilize people, to give them hope and confidence, and to strengthen their hands. And so strengthening their hands means they always had their hands. They always had the ability to repair the damage, but their hands weren't strengthened. They didn't have the confidence. They didn't have direction. And when you introduce a leader, and suddenly people's hands are strengthened. And now they're mobilized. Now they're confident. And so, and then just to kind of finish off this chapter, at least so we could say we finished the second chapter. Verse 19 says, when Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite official, and Geshem the Arab heard about this, they mocked and despised us and said, what is this you're doing? Are you rebelling against the king? And of course, and we'll see this repeatedly in Nehemiah, but every time you step out to do what God told you to do, you can count on it that there'll be opposition. In fact, I get worried when there isn't any opposition. When everybody says that they're all in favor, that makes me suspicious. There's just always going to be those who oppose. And if you're waiting, I've known some people, and sometimes they misunderstand what my dad teaches in Experiencing God, to say, well, we're not going to move forward until we're all unanimous. Well, I don't think my dad ever taught that you just never step forward if there's one person against you, because Satan will find at least one person that can vote no. And you don't want one person to hijack what hundreds of people are ready to do. And so just expect that there will be some opposition. And what's interesting is that they immediately say, are you trying to rebel against the king? And of course, he just came from the king. He's the cupbearer of the king. These people may probably have never met the king. Nehemiah has served in his presence for perhaps years. And so he knows the king well. But what they're saying is that is a death sentence. If you rebel against the king, you know there's nothing more serious in the king's mind. And so of course, all they're trying to do is rebuild a wall, but they're putting it in the worst possible light. This isn't about rebuilding a wall. This is rebellion. This is treason, and that will always be one of the most frustrating things about leading, is when people malign your motives. When they can't necessarily deny what you're doing, but they're just going to attribute it to the worst of motives. You're just trying to build a name for yourself. You're just trying to be a big deal. You just want people to do what you want them to do. And Nehemiah is going to be classic in not letting them get to him, not let them make him angry or get defensive and start being diverted and distracted into constantly defending his own reputation because he's being lied about all the time. And so he says they mocked him. And it's hard to be mocked. It's hard to have people that just flat out mock you. It's one thing just to disagree with you, but mocking means that you're not even open to, that you're not interested in finding out facts. When you mock, that means, no, I'm totally against you. I'm totally against you ever succeeding. I don't want to understand you. I'm not open to having my mind changed. I am very much your opponent and intend to always be one. And so Nehemiah ends in verse 20, says, I gave them this reply, the God of the heavens is the one who will grant us success. We, his servants, will start building, but you have no share, right, or historic claim in Jerusalem. And so Nehemiah very quickly is identifying the people that are not going to be helpful. And again, we can unpack this. We'll see this more in sessions to come. But one of the dangers I find with leaders sometimes is, especially in churches, is that we want to be all inclusive. We just want everybody to get along. We want to include everybody. My dad sometimes, I think, could perhaps do that a bit to a fault, where he was a little bit too trusting, too open. He was too willing to let people join his team whose hearts really weren't right. They weren't the kind of people that were ever going to take an organization far. I think my dad, one of his faults was perhaps he was a bit too optimistic. Nehemiah, what we'll see is he's very much trusting in God, but he's also very much a realist. He's a pragmatist. And he realizes right off the bat, you know what? He doesn't spend any time trying to win over these people to join the team. Yeah. Hey, if these people, if they join up, like they'll have people they can send and resources, and we'll be able to build the wall faster and we'll get along. He very quickly discerns this person is just not with us. He's not of us. He's an enemy. You don't bring enemies into the camp. You don't bring enemies into places of influence and prominence. Nehemiah is about how do we get this job done? And he's very, very good at discerning friend and foe. And he keeps his foes at a distance where they can't disrupt and get inside. And I've seen this in churches, seen this in organizations. Once you've got bad folks as a vice president in your company or as a deacon in your church, it's much more dangerous, much more difficult to address that. And so Nehemiah at the very outset there are just so many things he could do early on that would have derailed the whole effort. He's so vulnerable in the beginning, and so he's very careful. Eventually, when he can get trusted people in his vice president roles, in his key leadership roles, perhaps he can, even then he's very careful, but at the early the early parts of this whole effort, he's very careful to keep his enemies away from places of influence. And he sometimes we think, well, the most important thing is unity. We let's just sacrifice whatever we have to so everybody gets along. But that's not necessarily the primary thing. The primary thing is, what is it that God's called us to do? And once we know what that is, I've known lots of people that forfeited what God wanted them to do because they thought the most important thing always was unity. That unity trumped God's work. And I would say, no, God's work is the most important thing. It's great to have as much unity as you can have, but don't ever let that trump everything else. And so Nehemiah realizes, no, unity is not what I'm here for. I didn't come all the way to Jerusalem to have everybody get along. I came here to get a wall built. And so anything that's going to stand in the way of me getting God's will done, I'm not going to tolerate. And so he doesn't. And of course, we'll hear from these folks again. But Nehemiah, he very quickly discerns who his friends are, who his foes are, and he never lets the two intermingle. And so we'll carry on. We'll actually move into chapter 3 the next time that we talk
soon,
about this.
We've hardly started, Richard. Well, thank you. And just as a reminder to folks, we will pick this up in around about a month. We're not sure exactly when we'll start into Nehemiah again,
but we will continue.
But we will continue. It will continue, and probably for quite a while.
And if we just have my dad just fill in for me for a few weeks, we'll see how he does.
Yeah. It'll be a trial period. Yeah. So until next time.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If this is something you enjoyed, it really makes a difference if you leave a review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. We always love hearing from our listeners, so email us at podcast@blackaby.org.